let's talk about Newcastle Airport.
Newcastle, love Newcastle. You a fan of Newcastle? You don't like the Gold Coast.
It's a lovely town. I've had some good friends who've lived up in Newcastle, and I've been there a couple of times. So it seems like a good place to be. Newcastle Airport. On the subject of airport infrastructure from earlier, as we may know, they're in the middle of a big refurbishment of the international terminal and the international services. They're getting their runways are being redone. And Newcastle Airport is basically coming out and saying, once our international upgrades are complete, we could be looking at daily international flights. Daily flights to New Zealand. We could be seeing services to Singapore, 2 daily flights to Singapore, regular Pacific services. Other destinations could include places like Kuala Lumpur, Bangkok, Middle East airports such as Dubai or Doha connecting onto Europe, Pacific airports like Auckland or Nadi with their connections to US and Canada. So basically, this idea of Newcastle could take advantage of hub travel.
Yeah, because if you fly to Singapore, that kind of opens up the world. And in fact, actually, Auckland as well is a bit of a hub because you could then go on to New York as well. So it does seem... And it makes absolute sense because you have a huge population, probably millions of people in that Newcastle Hunter region, that would obviously all choose, even if they had to pay slightly more, they would all choose to rather start off in Newcastle and start their international holiday than go down to Sydney.
Yeah, because many passengers in the Hunter region at the moment are choosing to fly out of Sydney instead of Newcastle because Sydney has all the international connections. Newcastle Airport, about 2 hours drive north of Sydney. Currently no international services. I believe it has had a handful in the past. But Dr. Peter Koch, the CEO of Newcastle Airport, has said... He told the Newcastle Herald, quote, "We know the demand locally is good, but we don't have the airport facilities right now." He said, "Getting airline flights is a very competitive business. It can take years to get a new route established, but once you do, the rewards are amazing." He's also said that aside from these international flights, there is enough demand right now for 3 daily services to Perth, which could be interesting, particularly considering that, bringing up one of our old friends, particularly considering that Bonza is not currently flying to Perth. So if Newcastle Airport and Bonza play their cards right, we could see Bonza potentially flying from Newcastle Airport to Perth if they can get the connection in at Perth.
It's really interesting because you should be a consultant for Bonza because you've been kind of like hinting at this, like when you want 2 friends to get together and you're whispering in both of their ears. You're going up to Newcastle and being like, "Have you seen what Bonza's wearing today? Oh, looking very good." And you go up to Bonza and be like, "Absolute stud, mixed stud over there."
So what you're saying, Adam,
go on,
is that I'm being a wingman.
You can have that. You can have that. You can have that. That was great. And he's got, for those of you not watching this on YouTube, the smile on his face. He knows he's hit a 10 out of 10 there. He knows he nailed it. That was wonderful. We should stop the show right there on that high note. But that is extraordinary.
Thank you.
That's extraordinary. When we go down to the office in 10 minutes, we're going to have to go and tell everybody what you did and try and reenact it. That was brilliant.
Getting back to the news, this is... This local business group, Business Hunter, they've made a pre-budget submission calling on the New South Wales government to set up a $15 million aviation fund over 3 years to attract new flights. Newcastle Airport would match this dollar for dollar. And they've made this point that New South Wales is the only state not offering funding to attract airlines. Because, Queensland has got its attracting aviation investment fund. You've got aviation fund down in Victoria. Perth, the Western Australian government is trying to attract more flights to Perth. But New South Wales has kind of been resting on its laurels, isn't it? Because Sydney is the biggest gateway into Australia. And so possibly the attitude is, well, we don't need to attract flights. We've got Australia's biggest airport. But some of these more regional airports, like Newcastle could become, a great sort of secondary or tertiary, once Western Sydney opens up, a great tertiary airport for Sydney, particularly if you get better rail connections and better road connections and better public transport connections. Because right now, reaching Newcastle Airport is a little bit dire.
Yeah, and it's a two-way thing because obviously when you start off, you are able to, turbocharge this route and get a lot more international travel. But the more international travel you get, the more that Newcastle itself could become an international destination. People actually, from around the world coming to Newcastle, that being a stop for when people come and travel Australia, and that could absolutely turbocharge the area. There's no reason one day Newcastle couldn't be as great as a Goldie. Eh?
I don't know if Newcastle would want that, Adam.
In my eyes, Newcastle will never be as great as a Goldie. I love the Goldie.